Well, hello again. I'm Robert Fithin, back for more. Part 4, ranking 215 albums from the year 1992. What have we done? About 30 albums so far. We are inching our way along, and I definitely appreciate you joining me on this journey. Very fun to listen to all of these albums again. Some of them I heard, within a few years. Some of them I have not heard since the early 90s. Some of them I'm hearing for the first time, and we are up to number 184. So we're now up to the band Drop 19s, and the album is called Delaware, even though these guys are from Boston. They had a couple albums out in the 90s. This was their debut, and then they kind of disappeared for about 30 years. Came out with another one, and they just released yet another album this year. So they are apparently back. Drop 19's yet another one of those bands where I heard about them more than I actually heard them. So it was nice to be able to finally listen to a complete album and get an idea of this band whose name I've just had in my mind, for 35 years or so, and finally get to hear what they're all about. And they're referred to as dream pop and indie rock. They do have some dream pop elements in here, but the thing about this album that gets a thumbs up from me is the variety. Every song has its own identity. Everything is different than the song you just heard, those are my favorite kind of albums. There are quite a few skippable tracks on this. It doesn't all work. The first track, Delaware, is okay. It's your basic lo-fi garage pop type thing. Some people would call this type of thing indie rock. I don't really like the term indie rock because indie rock to me describes more of the way an album or music is sort of recorded and manufactured and produced and promoted more than the sound of the music. So I don't, indie rock gets used to describe music that's on major labels with big producers, and that's not indie rock. But anyway, so yeah, dream pop and like lo-fi garage pop is basically what I would call this. And so the first track kind of sets you up with some like the lo-fi garage thing. Second track is called Ease It Halen. It's really just this kind of electric guitar strumming while the lead guy just talks of, does like lists of Van Halen songs, kind of mumbles them and Van Halen albums, and then does a couple of verses about, I don't know, Van Halen and some other group. It's really kind of pointless. It's not a very good second track. This is the kind of thing that would work better at the very end of an album or something like that. Then you get the single Winona. I don't know if this is about Winona Ryder, another song about her, or maybe it's Winona Judd, or maybe it's another Winona, but it's kind of just, it's okay, it's kind of there. And then we get what I think is the best track on here. My favorite track is this 9-minute long, definite dream pop type of thing. Nice melody in there, just kind of layered, sounds with some little flourishes on the extremes of the soundscape there. You really have to listen for it, though, and this is called Kick the Tragedy, and it's great for the music. The problem is halfway through this 9-minute song, you get this sort of teenage monologue that just seems to go nowhere, and it's like it kind of ruins the whole vibe. I like the music. The music then comes back in a fuller, thicker, kind of more bass sound going on, so that was nice. But just I could have done without the ramblings in the middle of this. So yeah, I think that comes up a lot as far as what brings the album down in the rankings. Is there just some of the decisions made to put things in certain places or to kind of insert this into a song or whatever? I just didn't care for a lot of it. But again, the variety on this, I mean, you go from one track to the next and it's a completely different experience. All kind of lo-fi, all kind of, dream pop kind of thing. There's just an absolute noise rock track that's actually pretty good as far as noise rock goes, called Rayberry Rememberer. And then there's just an acoustic, a track called Baby Wonder's Gone, where it's just, again, this time acoustic strumming and just some really, kind of lo-fi vocals that it just doesn't go anywhere. There is My Aquarium towards the end of the album, where you get the female vocalist and she's just duetting with the guy, and they're just doing this kind of forgettable acoustic thing again. It doesn't sound like a lot of it's trying very hard. But again, going for that, quote, indie rock kind of thing, which is not, there's so many skippable parts of this. to get to the interesting stuff, which is really, when you add it all up, is only about 3 tracks. They do a really interesting version of Madonna's Angel song that was really early for her, like on the, I think it was on the Like a Virgin album. They do a really good job with making that into sort of a, you know, like a garage pop type of thing. Really did well with that. That's one of the highlights. And like I said, the one that's, you know, 9 minutes long, the music part of that is a highlight. But there's too many kind of skippable moments. But I do appreciate the variety. But overall, you know, I might check out what their second album from the 90s is like, see if that's a little more consistent with the quality. But yeah, that's my take on Delaware from Drop 19s. It's another year, another Bob Dylan album, and this one is a bunch of blues and folk covers called Good As I've Been to You. Long album, very acoustic album, just basically Bob Dylan and his guitar and a little harmonica thrown in. So when I say solo album, it's definitely a solo album. It starts off with Frankie and Albert, which is kind of an early version of Frankie and Johnny. He's telling the story there. It's kind of hard to understand some of the things he's singing in some of these songs. He kind of has this voice. I mean, he's older now. And I've always liked Bob Dylan's vocal in his 60s stuff, you know, the really smart-ass kind of social commentary, human nature commentary type of stuff, where he's being very sarcastic and, you know, you forgot to lock the garage door. Once upon a time you dressed so fine, threw the bumps of dime in your prime, didn't you? I always thought his vocal style went really, really well with those lyrics and really brought the kind of the, you know, the cutting style of those lyrics out, you know, just cut right to the bone. But, you know, doing folk stuff and doing, especially the blues covers on here, you know, from guys that have been around, you know, these songs have been around since the 40s and 50s and probably earlier in some cases. But he's older now. His voice has sort of an impish, kind of like little creature kind of quality. Like, you know, I can't really do it, but you know what I'm saying. It's like this little, I don't know, like something that would be in Lord of the Rings coming out to do some blues tunes. It's not awful, but it's not, you know, substantially essential Bob Dylan. It's a thing that you want to listen to a couple of times and then just be kind of done with. He sounds kind of ridiculous by the time it gets to the end. He's doing things like Froggy Gone A-Courtin', you know, where he's talking about all these little animals and insects coming to the party, and it's almost like Old MacDonald had a farm type of thing. Kind of not really in a Bob Dylan thing that I want to hear from him. Up-tempo numbers are better than the slower ones with him, because at least you got the, you know, the up-tempo kind of, you know, it keeps moving, 3 minutes long, you know. So not my favorite Bob Dylan album, if you haven't figured that out. If you've heard 80 Bob Dylan albums and you're ready for another one, you know, you may want to check this out. It's got its moments. But if you've only heard 2 or 3 and you're ready for more, I wouldn't say this is something that you go to immediately if you're just starting out with Bob Dylan. This is the kind of thing that a super fan listens to when they've heard everything else 20 times or 100 times. You know, like I said, my big spot for the Bob Dylan output is the 60s, the mid-60s stuff where he's got the sarcastic, smart-ass lyrics. And, I mean, there was nobody, he was untouchable as far as I'm concerned with his songwriting and the delivery of that then. When he gets into the crooner stuff later on in the late 60s, early 70s, I'm not a big fan of that. He had his kind of a comeback in the mid-70s. That stuff is really good. 80s stuff, hit and miss, and then of course he comes back after this album with some great stuff. So he's got better stuff that you can listen to from multiple decades, but this is for the super fan that's heard it all and wants to hear something a little different. It's time to talk about the band Dirty Rotten Imbeciles, but you know what? We're all friends here. You can just call them D.R.I. They put out the album Definition in 1992, and by this point, these guys have been around for nearly, for around 10 years actually, doing the punk thing, doing the kind of mixing the punk into the metal thing, coming up with a little thrash action, and they were one of the first bands to be able to pull that off. So these guys were highly influential on some of the thrash bands that came later, and that's exactly what this album sounds like. It sounds like a band that is influential. It sounds like a band that is kind of stuck in their early primal kind of stuff and isn't really moving on. So you've got other bands that were influenced by them kind of taking the reins, little more interesting musically, but still the hard thrash sound, little better vocals, little more going on with the lyrics, you know, with these bands that they influenced, and they're kind of still stuck here in the elementary phase of thrash metal, and that's the problem with this album. Great thrash sound, you know, great guitar, you know, it's got the drums, it's got the guitar, you crank it up, you bang your head, you know, it's thrashing out your speakers. If you're 18 years old, this is going to sound great in 1992. If you're being introduced to this now and you're in your 40s or 50s, probably not so much. And a lot of that has to do with the vocals and the lyrics. And I'm not the only one that thinks that. Lead singer thinks that himself. He's got a song called Tone Deaf, second track on here, where he's talking about how he doesn't have a tremolo, he doesn't know how to sing, he doesn't have a meter, he doesn't have any, you know, he can't sing at all, he can't hit the notes, he can't go high, he can't go low, and, you know, it's like, okay, well, at least he's honest. Starts off with the Acid Rain song. It's 1992, so they're all concerned with acid rain and putting out the concerns about the environment with things like don't use aerosol cans and things like that. You know, so it's nice to go back and hear bands that actually have concern for things like that, because that really doesn't happen too much anymore, at least with like thrash bands and whatever. You know, government cover-ups and, you know, sticking it to the man and all that kind of stuff that was going on with hard rock and alt rock at the time, and people really speaking their minds. You know, you're not going to get a lot of that these days with the hard stuff. But you know, they've got really silly stuff on here. Dry Heaves, a song about, you know, a little minute and a half thing about him screaming about how he doesn't like dry heaves. I don't like dry heaves. I hate dry heaves. Really pounding it to the people who love dry heaves, if they're out there, you know. But, you know, you got stuff like that. You got stuff like, you know, if you got something to say, just say it, yeah, say it. You just say what you want, say what you mean, say it. You know, so, you know, it's pretty elementary stuff. And the thing is, a band that's been around this long, doing this kind of thing, should really be developing kind of beyond that lyrically. That's great when you're putting out your first couple of albums and you're young and you got the attitude and you got the rage and the aggression and the angst, as it was called back then. But you got to move on. You got to develop, you know, and they're kind of stuck in that realm the whole time. And so by the time this album's out, I think a lot of people were kind of expecting more. And so, like I said, they moved on to bands that these guys influenced. I think if you want to check out Dirty Rotten Imbeciles, this is probably not the album to get started on. It's probably something more like Thrash Zone. That was probably their biggest one from '89, or maybe something a little earlier from than that. But yeah, you're going to get a lot of very simplistic lyrics. You know, a song about hating, called The Application, about hating filling out job applications. You know, but if that's what you want, if you want really simplistic lyrics about things that young people are going through, I hate filling out I mean, a lot of people, no matter what your age is, they hate filling out job applications. So maybe that is actually a universal age type thing. But yeah, if you want really simplistic lyrics and just the kind of raw aggression or whatever, maybe you want to check this out. It's D.R.I, Dirty Rotten Imbeciles, and Definition. All right, it's a bit of a dip for the legendary Pink Dots, unfortunately. This year's album is called Shadow Weaver, and I don't want to spoil anything, but if you remember my series from 1991, when I reviewed their album from that year called The Maria Dimension, I ranked that one fairly high, say the least. And yeah, so I really loved it. I absolutely loved that. I was blown away. And had no expectations. I didn't really remember the legendary Pink Dots. I vaguely remembered their name, threw that on, liked the cover, and was blown away. Loved it. Loved the songs, loved the feel, loved the whole thing. And so my expectations for that one were non-existent, and it blew me away. And so this was the opposite. This one, I was like, man, can't wait to check out the next one. Shadow Weaver, 1992. Here we go, legendary Pink Dots. And it was the opposite. My expectations were really high, and they were not really met. This one is a lot of ambiance, a lot of sound effects, some vocals here and there. The vocals are somewhat annoying, and so it was a letdown, basically. I don't know if they got a hold of some different dealer, maybe got some bad acid or whatever, but this one, or maybe these are just tracks that were not used for the Maria Dimension, I don't know. Maybe they lost a little bit of inspiration. Maybe they're road weary. I don't know their story. I tried looking up some information. I didn't want to do that for a lot of these albums. I don't like having preconceived, you know, critics' opinions and whatever. But this one I listened and then looked up some stuff on it to see if I could find anything. Not a lot of information on what went on between last year, you know, 91's release and then 92's release. So I don't know exactly what's going on here. But as you can see from the ranking, this one is not nearly anywhere in the same universe as where I ranked the Maria Dimension. It's not awful. It's just really not a lot going on here other than, you know, soundscapes and dreaminess and noise. Not really noise, but, you know, just ambience, you know, like I said. And some sound effects, you know. You got a nice track here, the Prague thing with a nice violinist playing. That's a nice little piece, and, you know. But nothing that's like, wow, where has this been all my life? You know, like I was with last year's The Maria Dimension. So, you know, I'm going to definitely give some more listens to some more legendary Pink Dots album, but this one just didn't quite do it for me. All right, what do you get when you take Chris Layton, the drummer from Double Trouble, and Tommy Shannon, the bassist from Double Trouble, says Stevie Ray Vaughan's band, team them up with Ian McLagan and Doyle Bramall II with Charlie Sexton on guitar and vocals. You get a band called the Archangels that only came out with one album in 1992. I mean, they came out with one album, period, and it came out in 1992. This CD I used to see everywhere. I mean, in the used bins. This would be like one of those CDs that it seemed like every time there was used CDs and they were $1, you would see this CD there. And I never really knew what it was. The cover art, definitely very eye-catching. I thought it was some kind of blues rock thing, but I didn't know it had all those people in it. And yeah, finally got a chance to check this out after all these decades and see what it actually sounded like. And what it sounds like is really, really, really average blues rock. This is not anything spectacular. It was produced by Little Steven, by the way, so you have all these people involved. But there's nothing really awesome here. I mean, the last two tracks, Shape I'm In and then Many Ways to Fall, kind of pick things up a little bit. They're a little more lively than the rest of it, but it takes like, you know, 50 minutes to get there. It's an hour-long CD just about. And so, yeah, but a lot of average stuff on here. And the vocals, considering it's Charlie Sexton, Beat So Lonely, vocals aren't that great. There's a little spices of great guitar licks here and there, you know, some nice solos every once in a while, like maybe once every 3 or 4 songs. But there's nothing spectacular about this. And I can see why they made just kind of one album. And I think it probably went right to the bargain bins. And that's where, you know, people picked it up for $5.99 or $3.99 or whatever and go, I listened to it a few times and then sold it back to the CD store. And now it's in the dollar bin. But yeah, so that's probably what happened there. But I nothing really to say about this other than just your basic, very, very standard blues rock. I mean, this is the kind of thing where, you know, you go into a bar and it's not even nighttime. This is the band that plays at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You know, was really expecting a little more from this. Still like the cover art, very eye-catching. But can't really recommend this. I mean, if you're going to listen to some blues rock, there's 500 albums that would go. I don't know about 500. There's many albums I would choose to listen to before this one. So yeah, but you know, now at least when I see Archangels in the dollar bin again, I will know what it sounds like. Up next is The Beautiful South and their album called 0898. Love the cover art of that. That's one of the first things that drew me to this release. Way back in, I think it was 94 probably when I got this. It was in a room full of discarded CDs at the college radio station, and so I just grabbed a few that looked like they had interesting covers, and this was one of them. Had no idea who they were, what they sounded like, and listened to it a few times, and it's been in the shelf over there ever since. So you got this guy named Paul Heaton that writes all these lyrics, and basically their whole concept is, well, most of it anyway, is that they've got these sort of, some of them violent, some of them, you know, kind of unsettling lyrics that goes along with this very light, sort of loungy music here. Very sparse arrangements on this. The very first song on here, Old Red Eyes is Back, is a great way to start it. It paints the picture of this, you know, character who's a complete alcoholic and, You know, he keeps falling off the wagon and getting back on the wagon and falling out, and eventually he just passes away with a whiskey bottle by his side. Well-written song, great kind of way to set the tone, that this is not going to be just a bunch of love songs or a bunch of light material, at least lyric-wise. Music-wise, it certainly is. You've got the next one on here, We Are Each Other. Lovers that are very, very close, you know, real close, to the point where they've just kind of intersected personalities and they've just become each other. There's the track on here, We'll Deal With You Later, where it starts to get more like, you know, wow, these are really kind of harsh lyrics here. We're gonna, you know, it's all about war and guns and people shooting each other and war, and we're gonna do away with the queen and the duke, and we'll feed them to the alligators and all that kind of stuff. And again, this very light, lilting music is going along while all this is happening. You've got a couple of vocalists here. You've got Dave Hemingway, you've got Brianna Corrigan. She's only on a couple of tracks on here. Things continue with 36D, a song about, you know, it's a very preachy song about, you know, going off on this woman who's beautiful and obviously is well endowed with the breasts. And she seems to have made some sort of career for herself on that, but she should close her legs and open her mind and, you know, see things other than just that. You know what, if she's making a living and she's happy, who gives a fuck? You know, it's very preachy, and, you know, Styx did it better with Miss America, quite frankly. But yeah, so that's on here. By the time you get to the song Something That You Said, which one of the first lines is, you walk into your house and she's stabbing your mother. She wants to show you she loves you like no other. One of the final lines is, the perfect kiss is with the boy you just stabbed to death, or whatever. It starts to get a little bit predictable. It's like, okay, we get it. Your whole thing is you've got these outrageously violent lyrics and off-the-wall lyrics going with this very light music. And it starts to get more of like it's a skit. One of the things that kept me from ranking this higher and really, you know, liking this a lot more is that the music itself is totally forgettable. There's not a lot of big melodies going on here. There's not a lot of support for these lyrics. The music seems very, very secondary and just kind of like part of the gimmick. And they don't really do anything to enhance that or make it more memorable. It's just very light background, loungy kind of music that really doesn't stand sort of on its own. So it doesn't really work for a whole theme, you know. Like I said, it's almost like a skit, like something you'd see on like a Saturday Night Live or something like that, where they're advertising an album and the lyrics are bloody and whatever, and the music is really light. I mean, some of these lyrics could work well with like a hard metal album, actually. But so yeah, When I'm 84 is the final track on here, and thankfully, that is not a cover of one of my least favorite Beatles songs, When I'm 64. But again, love the cover art. I think that's just really interesting. The faces here with turtles under them, moving them. And this seems to be one of those things that are just made for CDs. First of all, it's 50 minutes long. And then the booklet, each page is the lyrics and then a photo that goes along with it, a painting. And some of the paintings are just as harrowing as the lyrics. So you got, you know, shaking hands with a severed arm on the floor. The one that's about, you know, the song where Brianna Corrigan is singing, you know, this is my face, this is my smile, this is the way this is the song that I played, I'm the woman you laid. I'm the woman you laid is the end of every line. That's the photo that goes along with that. Just looks like a raw cut of steak or something fashioned into a human head, laying in bed. So yeah, walking canes, and the middle one turns into a snake. So, you know, interesting how they did that, you know, one painting for each song in the booklet of that. But yeah, the beautiful South. They are from Hull, England. And yeah, it starts off great, but it does get a little repetitious. You kind of get the joke, and you're kind of like, okay, are we going to have anything different here? And the answer is no, we're not going to have anything different here. We're going to keep repeating this theme over and over again. Lyrics that contrast with the music. So that's their thing. They're doing it through the whole CD. But it does turn into, it gets a little campy. It gets a little more like a skit. So that's what I think about that group and that album. All right, now we're rocking with the band Babylon AD, and the CD is called Nothing Sacred. This was their second album. I'm not even sure if they had a third. This is one of those bands, you know, hard rock, kind of glam rock, kind of esque bands that got signed in the early 90s and came out with a couple of albums, didn't really do too much. I think they had a song called The Kid Goes Wild. That was their biggest thing. That was on the earlier self-titled album. This one is Nothing Sacred. And this is just straight ahead rock, a lot of it. You know, at this point, a lot of these bands, either new bands that had just been signed or bands that have been around since the 80s. 1992, they're taking off the makeup. They're not wearing the flashy spandex and the, you know, the gloves and all that kind of stuff anymore. And that's what these guys look like. Kind of leathered up a little bit here. Still got the long, you know, scraggly hair. Still got the guitar licks. Wow! You know, that kind of stuff. A little bit of sprinkling of cheese on here. Nothing too outrageous, though. The cheese comes mostly with the backing vocals, you know, doing that kind of sing-songy thing during choruses and stuff like that. But Babylon AD never really made it big. They're on Arista, which, you know, Clive Davis is in charge. And I don't think he really promoted a lot of hard rock stuff. They did. I don't remember Arista. I don't remember playing anything from Arista. I'm trying to remember, like, Arista promo CDs when I was on rock radio in the mid-90s, and I don't remember any. I could be forgetting somebody, but I don't remember any, like, hard rock, alternative rock, you know, grunge, any of that stuff on this label. You know, they tried a couple of bands like this in the 90s. They were kind of, you know, still in that lane, but didn't, you know, obviously they didn't do anything. So I think they pretty much stuck to the pop stuff, you know. Whitney Houston, the Bodyguard soundtrack, you know, that was their big one from 1992, probably the biggest selling album of the year. But as far as Babylon AD, these guys, you know, if you like the hard rock stuff and a little bit of cheese on there, you might like these guys. This is really well recorded. I know that. It really fills the room, you know. It's hitting hard, you know. It's well produced. Got a little bit of flourishes here and there. The song Dream Train. Got a little bit of banjo action going on. Didn't see that coming. Of course, you got the power ballads on here for the extra cheese. You know, you probably just want to skip over those. They're nothing special. Bad Blood was the single that they tried to put out there. It wasn't getting picked up, though. But that's, you know, your basic rock stuff, blues rock, little cheese, you know, 1992 stuff, and the band would kind of disappear and go away. But if you're into that kind of stuff and you may be like, I never heard Babylon AD, I think I'll check them out. Well, maybe you should. I know that the band Morphine has a big following. A lot of people are really into this band, especially in the 90s. Their debut came out in 1992 called Good. And I think a better title would have been, okay, I guess. Not a big into this album at all. I've never heard it before I started doing this video series, so checked it out. They always was like with the alternative rock stuff, and they were always in CMJ and the alternative rock magazines, where they're really more of a jazz thing. But I guess jazz doesn't really have that much of a format, you know, like promotion. You know, not a lot of jazz stuff gets in 1992. New jazz stuff really got put out there, so they just got lumped in with the alternative stuff, and it's really more of like a jazz type of thing. A lot of it is just the saxophone and bass is prominent in this, so they really kind of got their own sound. They're not like a typical jazz thing. They got their own thing going on, which is cool. Kind of like a little bit of I don't know, coffee house kind of thing going on with the vocals. They do definitely get more jazzy on tracks like You Look Like Rain and I Know Part 2. You know, smoky jazz in that one, like a smoky jazz club. They got one track called Lies that's just basically a saxophone solo, and that's all it is for like a minute. So they got that going for them or against them, and yeah, it's their own sound, like a coffee house kind of jazz thing with bass going on, some other horns coming and going in there, and this vocalist that kind of sounds like he's just really not trying too hard. He's really just not into it. He'd probably rather be doing something else. Is kind of the way he sounds to me. Some of it, like the first couple of tracks, you're first figuring out what this band kind of sounds like, is like, this is like ska music played too slow. And then I start realizing, yeah, this really isn't ska. This is just a lot of some jazz stuff going on here. So a little bit of a different thing. Like I said, they got their own thing going on, which you might really, really like. I mean, I know, like I said, they got they had a big following in the 90s. We tried playing them on our college station. I think the album after this, Cure for Pain, was a lot bigger. We tried playing a couple tracks off that, and people were calling in like, yeah, no. put the grunge back on, put the Sonic Youth back on. So, yeah, like I said, it's called good, but I don't think it's quite at that quite at that level. Lillian is a band from New Orleans, another one of those sort of glam rock bands that never quite made it. Just put out a few albums. This one was their third, called Poetic Justice. And yeah, they just kind of floated under the radar. Some people might find this years later and go, oh wow, I've never heard of this, and then put it on and it rocks or whatever if you're really into, you know, pretty much straight ahead kind of glam rock kind of stuff. Not too flashy, not too sleazy, whatever. That's pretty much what this is. It doesn't do really much for me, but if you're somebody who's super into that scene and just got to have all of it, you definitely got to pick up some Lillian Axe. But yeah, a lot of, you know, decent guitar playing. You got the squealing, squawking guitars. You got the vocals that are pretty much right there in the mid a lot. You know, they don't embarrass themselves by trying to go way high or anything. There's no screaming. There's no whatever. The songs are pretty much basic. Starts off with a nice one called Innocence. You know, it's got a nice guitar riff in there. It's kind of meaty, you know, and fun. But the fun kind of goes away, and they kind of stick more to, like I said, kind of mid-level kind of stuff. They tackle some more kind of serious, heavy subjects, like the death of a, you know, a lover or a girlfriend or wife or some sort of life partner in this track called The Promised Land. But the lyrics are things like, you know, now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. Every minute I'm awake, I pray the Lord your soul to take, you know. So they're just, you know, just the cliches and whatever. They're tackling too much. You know, they're biting off more than they can chew with subjects like that. They got another song about self-harm that is kind of cliched as well. You know, kind of the power ballad stuff is going on in a couple of tracks, trying to get on that radio, trying to get on at the mall. I don't think it worked for them. Best track on here is called Body Double. That's definitely the most fun. That's a little more sexy, you know, talking about how they, I think it's about how, you know, you've seen the movie and you realize that the actress is, you know, a body double in the nude scene, and you want that body double. You don't care about the actress. You know, the two of them look the same. I know your game. I just want the body double. That was probably a single, I think. That's pretty, you know, it's okay. You know, it's for what it is. But a lot of just, you know, like basic rock stuff, you know, a little bit of Bon Jovi here and there kind of feel, a little bit of Boston Amanda, you know, kind of thing going on. But, you know, that's 80s stuff, and we're in 1992, so another one of those kind of acts that allowed grunge and alternative just to come in and completely take over. They do a cover of Badfingers, No Matter What, that actually isn't horrible. I usually don't like covers, but this one just kind of, you know, kind of rocks along. They don't try to step way out on it. They don't try to, you know, put their own spin on it too much. It's kind of like a bar band rocking out to it. So that's okay. I'd still rather hear the Badfinger version, but theirs is all right, I guess. The cover art. I think that's one of the reasons they didn't go anywhere at all. They're on IRS Records, so they got some kind of budget, you know. IRS is a respectable label, 1992. But that looks like something that a garage metal band would put out when they don't have any budget and they're selling CDs out of the back of a van. That, I mean, if you want to put an old lady, your name is Lillian Axe, and you want to put an old lady with an axe on your cover, great, whatever. But you got to make it look better than that. That is just like, that's not gonna, you know, that's not gonna cut it, and it didn't. And I think that's probably one of the reasons that, you know, they didn't really go anywhere. That, and they don't really have anything that's just reaches out and grabs you and you're like, oh man, crank that up. It's just, it's that type of thing that's just, if it's playing, it's playing. I don't think anybody's going to be like, hey, you know, that's ridiculous, turn that off. Or it's not going to be anything that really grabs you and, oh my God, who is this? I got to get this. It's just your mid-level, latter day, not really glammy, more of like rock with the glammy guitars, you know, the squawking and squealing, and that's Lillian Axe, Poetic Justice. Seaweed is another one of those early 90s sort of basement band bars, kind of like I was talking about earlier with like bands like Jawbreaker, where it's just a lot of, you know, chords on the guitar and, you know, just bashing away on the drums and just yelling away on the vocals. I mean, they've got a little more melody going on than Jawbreaker, but just a touch. You know, it's that early 90s sound that everybody was, you know, like I said, going to Cicero's in St. Louis, places like that, and just watching the band up there, and they're just kind of rocking out, you know, and you got a 45-minute set, and then they're done. You know, they do a couple covers, and we're good to go. But yeah, Seaweed, I remember these guys. I remember their later stuff from like 93, 94. And then they probably just went away. I think they were one of those sub-pop bands. But it's the type of thing that, you know, it's cool when you're 19 years old and it's the new sound. Now, it doesn't really sound so much like the great, you know, whatever. And so I'm kind of like listening to it a couple times actually, trying to just pick up on something. And, you know, it's just a lot of noisy, you know, basement bar type rock, you know, that was around for a while. Not exactly punk rock. You know, it doesn't have the energy of that. It's not exactly grunge. It's just that kind of thing that's it's kind of been forgotten about, really. I mean, you hear about all these 90s vinyl reissues or, you know, first time on vinyl. Oh, got to get it. It's first time on vinyl from 1992. And these bands are the ones that don't really have a lot of that. I think a lot of these bands have just kind of fallen by the wayside. They're definitely from a time. There's a couple of tracks on here that are nice. Recall is the first one that comes on, and it's kind of like, all right, this is what I remember from 1992 with these kind of bands. You know, it's got, like I said, a little bit of melody in there. There's a track later on called "Shut Up," which kind of stands out a little bit, but mostly it's kind of just forgettable. You know, your basic just young band in the early 90s rocking out. You know, so can't really rank it too much higher than this, but there's nothing like awful about it. It's not terrible. It's just not really definitive or very memorable. All right, more extreme metal now. The band is called Brutal Truth. The album is Excessive Conditions Demand Excessive Responses. Great band name, great album title. Music is, you know, it is more of the death metal kind of stuff, thrash, more of the death metal, I guess. There's the drumming, there's definitely the guttural vocals on this. When people think of death metal and they don't know much about it, and they haven't experienced a lot of it, they do the, yeah, it sounds like that. This actually sounds like that. The vocals, there's two. You got the guttural vocals, the growling stuff going up against the screeching vocals, so they kind of counter each other that way. Music, like I said, you got the, you know, drumming, speed drumming. But here it doesn't have the double kick thing that's going to blow your subs and just have the whole car shaking like that. This is more pronounced on the snare a lot, so it's a lot thinner of a sound. Just guitars just riffing and wailing all the way through, but there's not a lot of variety. That's the thing. It doesn't go a lot of different places. I mean, once you've heard the first track, you've heard pretty much how the whole album's going to sound, and that's why I'm putting it lower on the list. It's not as interesting. It just kind of sits there after a while. It's like, okay, what else is going to happen here? And the answer is not a lot. I mean, you have the usual death metal approach as far as the lyrics. They've got some great lyrics in here. You know, it's all about anti-establishment, anti-hypocrisy, corporate, anti-religion, anti-bullshit, pro-free thought, pro-individualism, you know, all that kind of stuff. They're bringing it in just about every song, but you know, you can hear all about that in other death metal that's a lot more interesting to listen to. So, you know, they do have a song called Anti-Homophobe, which was that's kind of different. It's all about how, you know, it's okay to be gay and gay people can do what they want and, you know, all that kind of thing. And so that you don't hear a lot of that with extreme metal, so that was kind of nice to hear that. It was kind of like, wow, okay. But other than that, it just kind of the same tropes that you hear in a lot of death metal, the guttural vocals, the screeching vocals. Not a lot of big, heavy riffing going on here. Not a lot of, you know, just flying off and just like, yeah, crank that up. It's just a lot of the same thing all the way through. So, you know, it's not bad, but it's not stellar, you know, I guess. It's just kind of right there. Like I said, if somebody doesn't know a lot about death metal and they do the whole like, yeah, I know what it sounds like. It's just a bunch of noise. It's a bunch of, grrr. This would be one of the albums they would point to and go, see, told you so. The band EMF followed up their big Sherbert Dip album that had the huge hit, Unbelievable on it, with the CD that no one cared about, called Stigma. This didn't do anything in the US, and I think just did a little bit in their home in the UK, with a couple of singles on here, which I actually had the singles, It's You and They're Here. So yeah, I was really waiting for EMF to do something to follow up Unbelievable, but they did not. Actually, It's You on here is It's You That Leaves Me Dry is the full title on this CD. But anyway, this album, have not heard this in so long and played it, and it's very unmemorable. It's like the kind of thing that just plays, and then you can't even, once it gets to song 6, you can't even remember song 2 or song 3. A lot of similarities in the music. It is, you can tell it's EMF because of the singer, but his voice just does this through every song. He rarely changes notes. You know, it's that kind of thing, while the guitar's, you know, swirling, and the, you know, it's that sound, but it doesn't have the melodies that the Sherbert Dip album had, with all kinds of different, you know, instantly recognizable songs, beyond, to me, just unbelievable. I mean, I liked several tracks on there, and even the ones that weren't necessarily singles. But on here, everything just seems to kind of blend together. I think this sounds kind of rushed, like maybe they had to go ahead and just grab something and just throw something together to put it out, to capitalize on their big success before it dried up, and they weren't even able to capture that. It, you know, they one-hit wonder pretty much at this point. There are some kind of high points on here. The track Getting Through, which comes more towards the end, maybe could have been a single instead of one of those two. Maybe it would have done a little better. The final track on here, The Light That Burns Twice as Bright, starts off with a great guitar riff. You think it's going to be something a little bit different than what you've heard in the previous, you know, 9 tracks or so. And then it kind of goes back into, you know, good old EMF territory. So not something I can exactly recommend, even if you're a big fan of Sherbert Dip or Unbelievable. But if you're an EMF completist and you want to get all 3 albums, you'll need Stigma. It's the second one. I mean, I guess it is a little higher up here in the ranking, just because there's nothing annoying on here. It's not anything that you want to go, God, turn that off. It's just not, it's very nondescript. It's just not anything just jumping out at you either. So it's very, very mid-level. So we're leaving things at number 173 for part number 4, ranking 215 albums from the year 1992. I'm Robert Fithen. I especially want to thank everybody who is leaving great comments on the videos, everybody who's even watching these videos. It took quite a bit of listening and a lot of reviewing to make these, and I definitely appreciate you watching this long series, a deep dive into 1992. And I noticed that these videos, the 1991 ones and the beginning of the 92 series, are getting more responses, more views than the few videos I did in between, like the vinyl finds and the David Lynch thing and the thing about the, you know, the pizza record and all that kind of stuff. I mean, those got some nice comments and views and whatever, but I think you're really liking these deep dives a lot more, and so I'm going to continue doing these. And I really appreciate everybody who is responding. That's what it's all about. I'll keep responding to the vinyl community videos that I'm watching, or I'll try to. I'm definitely watching a lot more than I comment on because I see them on my TV. But anyway, see you, hopefully, for part number 5. I'm Robert Fithen. Thank you so much for watching.